So I've been hearing a lot recently, and not just on this channel, but from other fans on Twitter as well, that the Bulls, even though we were better than last season, we likely won't be making the playoffs, and rather than finishing with a 9th or a 10th seed, we might as well just tank one last time to get a chance at a top 3 pick. And as a longtime Bulls fan who's seen my team go from being a dynasty to one of the worst teams for a number of years, to back in the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference, but still never crossing that hump to a title, to yet again being towards the bottom of the league. And so I take major issue with this strategy, or the concept of tanking in general. And to be honest, I'm not even just saying it for the Bulls. I actually think tanking in the NBA is a horrible strategy for any team. And that's what I want to talk about in today's video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bull Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Before I get into the video, just wanted to mention that I uploaded a video earlier today remembering and reflecting on the life of Coby Bryant. It's a bit different from the videos that I normally make, and because it's not Bulls related, you may not have seen it come through on your feed, so feel free to go ahead and check that out. I'll leave it in a link of it in the description as well as here in the video. But back to the topic at hand, tanking. The strategy of tanking has been around for a long time, and that doesn't just apply to basketball. It applies to a lot of sports where the worst team or teams are given the top draft picks to help them build for the future, as it wouldn't really be fair to give the best teams in a given league the top picks when they're already good. So with this rule in place, naturally it is sometimes in a team's best interest to intentionally lose to improve their chances of getting a top pick, if they really don't have a shot at making a run for a championship or even making the playoffs for that matter. Now, what separates the NBA from the other major sports leagues is that the NBA has a draft lottery system, which was implemented in 1985 for this purpose, to not incentivize teams to quote-unquote tank a season in order to secure a higher draft pick. Because even though you would receive higher odds of getting a top pick if you finished with one of the worst records, it was by no means guaranteed a team that, say, finished with the 10th worst record in the league could get lucky and get the number 1 pick. And this actually happened to the Bulls in 2008 when they had a 1.7% chance of landing the number 1 pick. And you probably remember they got it and they drafted Derrick Rose. A year where they didn't intend to tank, they just weren't very good the prior season and got lucky enough to get the number 1 pick. Now fast forward to the Bulls' most recent rebuild after trading for Jimmy Butler, and after that trade the Bulls knew they were not at all in a position and really anytime soon, so in theory it made sense to have a few losing seasons to build the team through the draft, especially since the Bulls owned their draft picks. They hadn't traded them away to any other team. But here's the problem with that approach. The players are never going to intentionally throw games or play poorly on purpose because the front office has a strategy of taking the season, or if the front office has deliberately told them to do so because the goal is to lose games. First of all, a front office can't do that, at least officially anyway. They cannot make it known that they're telling their players to do so. That actually violates the NBA rules and regulations, and teams can be penalized for that. But the players are always going to be playing their best and playing to win. Maybe not all the players, because some don't have the same work ethic as others, but the fact of the matter is that these guys, meaning the players in the league, they're professional athletes. They're there for a reason. They are naturally competitive individuals and had to be in order to get to the level that they're at today. It is in their DNA it is not in their DNA to try and lose just so a team can get a better lottery pick. On top of that, this is their livelihood. They're looking to show what they can do to the rest of the league and play to the best of their ability to get paid, to sign bigger contracts, to make a name for themselves, to establish a legacy. So that's the first problem, is that the players aren't going to intentionally lose. Second, even if a team does absolutely horribly in a given season, let's say they win 5 games all year, finish with the worst record in the league, there is no guarantee they will get the number 1 pick. And with the new draft lottery odds that were put in place just 2 years ago, they're now not even guaranteed a top 3 pick. If you finish with the worst record in the league, the most you are guaranteed is a top 4 pick. And your odds of landing the number 1 pick are 14%. And the second and third worst team in the league share the exact same odds as the worst team in the league. And then finally, the other issue with tanking and why it's a bad strategy. The NBA draft is a bit of a crapshoot. It's very rare where you have a draft class where there is a franchise-changing player that is up for grabs, or at least known to be a franchise-changing player going into the draft. I know some players obviously become that after the fact when they weren't initially expected to. Again, why the lottery is a crapshoot. But guys like Shaquille O'Neal, Tim Duncan, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, who didn't even go number 1, by the way, even Zion Williamson, although even for him it remains to be seen if he'll actually end up becoming that type of player. But these type of players are incredibly rare. You don't see that coming around that often. Then you have guys on the other end of the spectrum like Giannis Antetokounmpo, who went 15th overall, not even in the lottery. Kawhi Leonard, who also went 15th overall. Steph Curry, who went 7th. Jimmy Butler 30th, Damian Lillard 6th. I mean, the NBA draft is so unpredictable that not only is it never a guarantee as a team where they're actually going to end up picking depending on their record, but also you never know how the player will actually fare in the NBA with that pick. So with all of that in mind, let's just take a quick road down memory lane in how the Bulls fared in their recent draft picks that they supposedly tanked for, and why I absolutely am not at all for tanking for this season, even if it means we narrowly miss the playoffs. So when the Bulls traded Jimmy Butler, they received Minnesota's number 7 pick in the lottery that year, which they chose to select Lauri Markkanen. So that wasn't a year where the Bulls tanked, because the Bulls actually made the playoffs that prior season, but set a rebuild in motion by trading their best player, essentially signaling the next year or two, we're going to be losing a lot of games and we'll need to build through the draft. Well, that first season, the Bulls started off the tank job pretty well by opening up the year going 3-20, good for last place in the league, before they proceeded to win 7 straight games and 10 of their next 12, to all of a sudden having a record of 13-22. And by that point, the Bulls had already won too many games to get the best odds at landing the number 1 pick, because so many other lower performing teams had continued to lose night after night. There was just no way for them to catch up. Well, by season's end, the Bulls finished with the 6th worst record in the league, which still gave them decent odds to land at least a top 3 pick, but they ultimately ended up with the number 7 pick, even falling further because the Sacramento Kings had actually jumped to the number 2 pick, which meant the Bulls were unable to get the prized possessions of the draft and guys like Luka Doncic, Trae Young, DeAndre Ayton, or even Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, the Bulls ended up selecting Wendell Carter Jr. at number 7, which wasn't a bad pick by any means for what they got that late in the draft, but missing out on guys like Luka and Trae Young, or even DeAndre Ayton, who are guys that are potentially franchise-changing players. I know some people are pretty disappointed with DeAndre Ayton, but he's still a very skilled big man that has a lot of potential. And that was in a tanking year that the Bulls, ended up getting that number 7 pick to get Wendell. Then the following season, the same type of approach. Tank to get Zion or Ja Morant. Those were the 2 prized possessions of that draft. This time, the tank job went a little bit better. They ended up finishing with the 4th worst record in the league. But again, they managed to fall to the number 7 pick. Teams like the New Orleans Pelicans and Memphis Grizzlies, who had finished with the 8th and 9th worst record in the league respectively, got lucky and won the rights to the number 1 and number 2 pick, which ultimately landed the Pelicans Zion Williamson and the Grizzlies Ja Morant. So even Bulls aside, this didn't work out for other teams who were in the tank race. The Knicks, who finished with the worst record, they only won 17 games that year in the hopes that they could land Zion and have him be the savior of the franchise. They fell to the number 3 pick. Even the Phoenix Suns, who finished with the 2nd worst record in the league, they actually ended up getting the number 6 pick. And as you know, that season the Bulls took Coby White at number 7. Again, another solid pick, but Coby is no Zion Williamson or Ja Morant. And then finally, last season, the Bulls, at least in my view, were not intending to tank last year. There were expectations that the Bulls were going to compete well and potentially make the playoffs with the new young core that had started building and developing through the draft. But again, we had an incompetent coach and front office, so the Bulls underperformed yet again. But this time they finished with a better record than the previous two seasons, finishing with the number 7 worst record in the league. But wouldn't you know it, despite having a better record, they ended up getting a higher draft pick than the previous seasons, getting a little lucky in the lottery this time and landing the number 4 pick, which the new front office used to select Patrick Williams. So I know this was a bit of a long rant, but here's the thing. The Bulls actually made out decently well despite not getting lucky in the lottery those years. There have been teams who have been tanking year after year and don't have much to show for it, like the Knicks, the Timberwolves, and even the Cavs. And what's worse when it comes to the strategy of tanking is that not only do you lose your fan base and interest across the league with so many years of losing, just in the hopes of getting lucky and landing a future star, but you also lower your chances of attracting free agents when you're in a constant state of rebuilding or losing. Big name free agents don't want to go play for a team that is losing on a consistent basis. That's a fact. They want to go play for either a contending team where they have a shot at winning a championship, or they want to go play for a team that is starting to blossom and showing a lot of potential to be a serious contender in the near future. And if you're just tanking year after year and you keep getting unlucky, you're just going to be in this perpetual state of losing. Now, I know the strategy has worked out for some teams, namely the Sixers, who had to build through the draft. We all remember trust the process, but they were a bad team for a really, really long time. And even then, they've still struggled to succeed in that they haven't even been able to make it outside of the Eastern Conference Finals after all these years. So yes, there are instances here and there where tanking year after year has paid off, but more often than not, it just leaves a team in a perpetual state of losing. And as a fan, that's never an enjoyable experience. And when it comes to the Bulls, we've been building up through the draft for the past 4 years now. It's time to start being competitive and taking a step in the next direction. I'm sure some of you would disagree with my take on tanking. Let me know what you guys think though. Do you think the Bulls should tank for a shot at another high draft pick one more time? Or is it enough is enough at this point? Let's finally start winning and making strides. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan and you like Daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.